Solve it, and $800 million is yours. Japanese billionaire CEO laughed, but a black waitress shocked everyone. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into this incredible story. In a luxurious restaurant in Tokyo, the atmosphere was electric with excitement and the chatter of influential businessmen. Shoji Takahashi, the CEO of one of Japan's most successful tech companies, stood confidently at the center of a group of guests, holding court. The lavish setting reflected his stature. Crystal chandeliers gleamed above, the finest wines were being served, and the entire room was filled with the smell of gourmet dishes. Takahashi was a man used to getting what he wanted, always in control, always the center of attention. Tonight, however, he had set up a challenge to entertain his guests. With a smirk on his face, he spoke to the crowd. Solve this riddle, and $800 million is yours. The room fell silent. All eyes turned toward him, awaiting the impossible question. The riddle was complex, dealing with artificial intelligence and algorithms, topics that were well beyond the reach of most people. Takahashi enjoyed the spectacle of seeing people squirm at the thought of solving it. After all, how could someone like him not dominate this game? He looked around the room, his gaze landing on Malia, a young black waitress serving at the event. Malia had been quietly moving around, carrying glasses and plates, unnoticed by most of the guests. She had learned to blend into the background over the years, a skill that kept her safe in a world that often overlooked her. But tonight, something was different. Takahashi saw an opportunity to showcase his intellect and power in front of his guests. He casually waved his hand toward Malia, mocking her in front of the crowd. Do you even think she could solve this? Let's see if someone like her has the brains for it. The room chuckled. A few guests exchanged glances, whispering to each other. Malia stood still for a moment, her hands steady on the tray, but inside, she was boiling. She had heard worse over the years, comments about her appearance, her intelligence, her place in the world. But something about the way Takahashi had casually dismissed her made her blood boil. She wasn't the kind of person who normally sought attention, but this time, she felt something stirred deep within her. Without saying a word, Malia stepped forward, her calm demeanor in stark contrast to the tension building in the room. She walked up to the large blackboard where Takahashi had written the complex riddle. The guests watched in stunned silence, not sure whether this was a joke or if Malia had a real shot at solving it. Takahashi was clearly amused, watching her with a smirk. He could barely contain his laughter as he thought about how absurd this situation was. All right, show me what you've got, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Malia took a deep breath, picked up the chalk, and began writing. The room held its collective breath. She was solving the riddle, step by step, with clarity and precision. Takahashi's smirk slowly faded as he watched her work. He had underestimated her, and now, he was starting to realize just how wrong he had been. As Malia filled in the final steps of the equation, she looked up at Takahashi, her eyes unwavering. The room was silent, waiting for his response. Takahashi's expression changed from amusement to shock. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The riddle was solved. Not only had Malia answered the question correctly, but she had done it in a way that made even Takahashi feel small. The room erupted in whispers. No one could believe what they had just witnessed. A young waitress, someone they had all assumed was out of her league, had just outsmarted the powerful CEO in front of them. Takahashi, once so sure of himself, was now stunned into silence. The power had shifted, and it was clear to everyone in the room that Malia was no ordinary waitress. The room was filled with a tense silence as Malia stood there, chalk in hand, the riddle solved, her calm confidence reverberating in the air. Shoji Takahashi, the billionaire CEO, stood frozen, his eyes wide with disbelief. He had expected to see the young waitress stumble, perhaps fumble, but never had he imagined she would unravel the complex puzzle with such grace. The guests, who had once laughed at her presence, now stared at her with a mixture of awe and surprise. Malia, however, remained composed. She didn't boast or demand applause. Instead, she stepped back from the board, her gaze unwavering as she met Takahashi's eyes. It wasn't about proving him wrong. It was about showing her worth, something that had been overlooked for far too long. Takahashi, still recovering from the shock, cleared his throat, attempting to regain some semblance of control. "Well," he finally said, his voice much softer than before, "it seems we have a real prodigy in the room." His words, however, carried no weight. The damage had been done. His earlier mockery had not only been silenced, but completely reversed. Takahashi's carefully constructed image of superiority had crumbled, and Malia had done it without uttering a single word of defiance. As the murmurs in the room grew louder, Takahashi was left to grapple with his pride. He had not only underestimated Malia, but had humiliated her in front of a room full of his peers. Now, the tables had turned. The powerful CEO, the man who controlled billions, stood before a young waitress who had just turned the tide of their encounter with her intellect. Malia's actions had made it clear. Intellect and capability were not bound by status, and the most powerful people in the room could sometimes be the least obvious. As the crowd buzzed with excitement, Malia returned to her duties. Her tray, filled with wine glasses, never wavered as she moved through the crowd, the echo of her victory still lingering in the air. The whispers continued, but Malia remained unaffected. She had done what she had come to do. She had proven her worth, not through arrogance, but through skill, and that was more than enough for her. Takahashi, now fully aware of the gravity of his earlier mistake, watched her retreat. His mind raced, trying to reconcile the situation in his head. He had just witnessed a complete reversal of power, and it left him questioning everything he thought he knew about control. The guests, who had initially been entertained by Takahashi's grand challenge, now saw the moment for what it truly was, a lesson in humility. The billionaire CEO had been schooled not by an academic or a business mogul, but by a waitress, a woman who had been dismissed as insignificant. And yet, in that moment, she had reshaped the narrative, proving that true power was not something that could be bought or inherited. It was something that had to be earned, through knowledge, through integrity, and through actions that spoke louder than words. Takahashi wasn't the only one who felt the sting of his own arrogance. As Malia continued her work, a few of the guests who had laughed at her earlier began to look at her differently. They started to see the quiet strength in her, the confidence that came from knowing who she was and what she could do. For the first time that night, she was not the invisible waitress in the background. She was someone they would not forget. And as the evening wore on, Takahashi's attempts to salvage the situation became increasingly futile. No matter how much he tried to regain control of the conversation, the spotlight was no longer on him. It had shifted to Malia, and it was clear that the room, for all its wealth and power, would never be the same. The game had changed, and for once, the most important thing in the room was not the money, but the respect that Malia had earned. Her quiet victory would resonate long after the night ended, a reminder to everyone in that room that power, in its truest form, could not be measured in dollars or status. It was measured in the strength of one's character, and Malia had proven that beyond a doubt. The evening continued, but the air had changed. Shoji Takahashi, still reeling from the unexpected turn of events, sat quietly at his table, trying to collect his thoughts. His guests, once entertained by his challenge, were now murmuring amongst themselves, glancing at Malia as she moved around the room with the same grace and poise she had always possessed. It was clear that something had shifted, and though Takahashi tried to regain control of the room, he was no longer the center of attention. Malia, the waitress who had been dismissed as insignificant just hours before, had now taken center stage in a way no one could have predicted. As the night wore on, the conversation in the room grew quieter. People who had once seen her as nothing more than a background figure began to look at her differently. Some whispered about the genius she had displayed. Others quietly admired her for the way she had handled herself under pressure. Shoji, meanwhile, sat in stunned silence, his mind racing as he processed the implications of what had just happened. He had expected Malia to fail, to be the punchline of a joke, but she had proven him wrong in the most spectacular way possible. It was a humbling experience for a man who had spent his life building an empire based on intellect and strategy. But as he sat there, He couldn't help but feel a sense of admiration for her. Despite the way he had mocked her, Malia had shown him a level of intelligence and confidence that he had never anticipated. As the evening drew to a close, Malia's actions reverberated through the room. Takahashi, unable to shake the feeling of defeat, approached her. For the first time, he saw her not as the servant she had once been, but as an equal. "Malia," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "I owe you an apology." Malia, her face still calm and composed, looked at him with a quiet understanding. She had expected nothing less. "You've done more than apologize," she replied softly. "You've learned something tonight, something about yourself and about the people around you." Takahashi nodded slowly, acknowledging the truth in her words. It wasn't just about the riddle or the money. It was about respect, about recognizing the value in others, even when they don't fit the mold of what society expects. In that moment, Takahashi realized that the real power in the room wasn't in the wealth he had accumulated or the reputation he had built. The real power was in the quiet strength of a person who refused to be underestimated, who proved their worth through actions and intellect. Malia's victory was not just a win for her. It was a win for everyone who had ever been overlooked or belittled. It was a reminder that greatness could come from unexpected places, and that true value wasn't defined by status or wealth, but by character and resilience. As Takahashi left the room that night, he couldn't stop thinking about Malia. Her presence, her intelligence, her strength, she had made him question everything he thought he knew about success. And in the quiet moments before he left, he made a decision. He would offer her something more than an apology. He would offer her a chance to be a part of his company, to work alongside him and his team, to bring her brilliance into the fold. He didn't expect her to accept, but he knew it was the right thing to do. As for Malia, she continued on with her night, doing what she did best, serving with grace and dignity. She didn't need validation from anyone. She had already proven her worth. And for the first time, she realized that the world was finally starting to see her for who she truly was. Someone who had always belonged at the table, not as a servant, but as an equal. The night ended, but the ripple effect of her actions would last long after the last guest had left. Malia's story was just beginning, and the world was finally starting to take notice. The next few days were a whirlwind for Malia. The night she had solved the riddle, the world around her seemed to shift. What had begun as a simple dinner service had turned into a pivotal moment in her life. Shoji Takahashi had not only apologized for his mockery, but had also offered her something far more valuable, a chance to work with his company. He had insisted it was more than just a job offer. It was a recognition of her potential. Malia, however, remained focused on the present. She didn't need validation from anyone, especially not from a billionaire CEO. Her pride wasn't something that could be easily bought or sold. Yet, the offer lingered in her mind. She had worked hard for everything she had, and the thought of joining a powerful company, of using her skills to make a real impact, was tempting. Still, Malia knew that her path wasn't defined by someone else's expectations. She had spent her entire life proving her worth to those who doubted her, but this was different. This wasn't about proving anything to Takahashi. It was about proving to herself that she could make her own choices. Days turned into weeks, and the story of her victory spread far beyond the walls of the restaurant. News outlets picked up the story, and soon, Malia was being interviewed by tech magazines, invited to panels, and recognized for the talent that had once been invisible. People who had never given her a second glance were now lining up to hear her story. But amidst all the attention, Malia stayed grounded. She knew that while the world might see her differently now, she was still the same person who had spent years working hard to make ends meet, the same person who had spent sleepless nights studying algorithms and reading about artificial intelligence. The fame was fleeting, but her abilities were permanent. Meanwhile, Shoji Takahashi, for all his wealth and power, couldn't shake the feeling that Malia had taught him more in one evening than he had learned in a lifetime of business dealings. He watched from the sidelines as her star rose, and although he had offered her a position at his company, he found himself questioning the true value of success. His empire, built on innovation and intelligence, seemed hollow in comparison to the quiet brilliance Malia had displayed. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that the world had a habit of overlooking those who didn't fit the typical mold. Malia wasn't just a waitress. She was a visionary in her own right. Takahashi had always believed in the power of intellect and money, but he had never seen the power of resilience and self-belief until Malia had walked into his life. But life, as it often does, had other plans for Malia. One afternoon, just as she was preparing to give another interview about her sudden rise to prominence, she received a call from Takahashi. "Malia," he said, his voice tinged with urgency, "I need your help." It was a request that took her by surprise. Takahashi, who had once dismissed her as nothing more than a server, was now reaching out to her for assistance. He had hit a roadblock in a major project, a challenge he couldn't solve on his own. The irony wasn't lost on Malia. She had been the one underestimated, the one no one thought could make a difference, and now the same man who had once belittled her was asking for her expertise. She paused for a moment, considering the offer. She didn't need to help him. She didn't know him anything. But Malia knew that this was more than just a chance to prove herself again. It was an opportunity to show the world that no one, not even the most powerful CEOs, could stand alone. They all needed someone who saw the world differently, someone who wasn't afraid to challenge the status quo. Malia agreed to help. When she arrived at Takahashi's office the next day, she found him waiting with a project that required her specific skills. It was a complex problem, one that only someone with a deep understanding of AI could solve. As she sat down to work, Malia couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. This was her moment, the culmination of everything she had worked for. Takahashi, watching her intently, finally understood. He wasn't the one holding all the cards anymore. He wasn't the one in control. It was Malia who had the power to change the game. As the hours passed, Malia worked tirelessly, her mind focused and sharp. When she finally cracked the code, she leaned back in her chair and smiled. "It's done," she said, turning to face Takahashi. The look on his face was one of genuine admiration. He had finally come to see what others had missed. Malia wasn't just a brilliant mind. She was a force to be reckoned with. "You were right," Takahashi said quietly, his voice filled with a mixture of respect and awe. "You've changed the way I see the world." For Malia, it wasn't about the money, the fame, or the recognition. It was about the quiet satisfaction of knowing she had done something that no one expected. And in that moment, she realized that her journey had only just begun. Days passed since Malia helped Shoji Takahashi crack the complex project, and although the collaboration had brought unexpected respect from the billionaire CEO, Malia felt herself growing restless. While her time at the high-end restaurant had earned her recognition, the allure of the corporate world didn't hold the same pull it once had. She had proven herself in the most unlikely of places, and now the question loomed. Where would she go next? Takahashi had extended several offers to join his company, but Malia wasn't sure if that was the right path for her. Her mind had always been on something bigger, something more impactful than just being a cog in the corporate machine. She'd spent years fighting for recognition in a world that barely saw her. Now that the world was beginning to notice, she knew she needed to create something of her own, something that would allow her to control her destiny. It wasn't about rejecting Takahashi or the opportunity he offered. It was about something deeper. Malia wanted to build something that would allow her to use her skills to help others, especially those who, like her, had always been overlooked. The decision wasn't easy. Shoji's company had the resources, the technology, and the influence to give her everything she'd ever dreamed of. But as she sat in her small apartment one evening, surrounded by books and sketches of ideas for her own projects, she realized that she couldn't settle. She had already fought too hard to be underestimated again. Malia picked up her phone and called Shoji. "I've been thinking," she began, "and I've decided to decline your offer." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. She could almost hear Shoji processing her words. "Malia," he said finally, "I understand. But I want you to know, you've made a real impact here. The way you've approached every challenge, it's changed the way I look at everything. If you ever change your mind, you have a place here." His words were sincere, and for a moment, Malia felt a pang of doubt. It would be easy to join a company where her brilliance could be nurtured, but that wouldn't fulfill the dream that had started to form inside her. She needed to pave her own path. "I appreciate that, Shoji," Malia said with a smile in her voice. "But I have something else in mind." A few weeks later, Malia unveiled her new project. It was a startup focused on using artificial intelligence to solve some of the most pressing social issues: education, healthcare, and accessibility. She wanted to create a platform where underserved communities could access resources that would otherwise be out of their reach. The project, named EmpowerAI, aimed to bridge the gap between technology and the people who needed it most. It wasn't just about making money. It was about creating a legacy that would help others, just as she had once been helped by the quiet brilliance of others. As word spread about her new venture, Malia found herself being sought out by investors, tech leaders, and organizations that wanted to help bring her vision to life. But it wasn't easy. There were countless challenges ahead. She faced skepticism from people who couldn't understand how a former waitress with no formal education in business could possibly succeed. But those doubts didn't faze Malia. She had spent her life proving herself, and this was just another hurdle to overcome. Along the way, Shoji reached out again. He offered her his full support, not as an employee, but as a partner. He had seen the potential in her from the start, and now he understood the bigger picture. Together, they could build something that would change the world. Malia had the skills and the vision, and Shoji had the resources and connections to help bring it to life. After much deliberation, Malia agreed to form a partnership with Shoji, but on her terms. She would lead the project, with full creative control. Shoji would be there to offer guidance and support, but this was Malia's dream, and she would be the one to shape it. With the backing of Shoji's company and the strength of her own vision, EmpowerAI began to take off. The platform became a beacon of hope for communities across the world, providing free educational tools, access to healthcare information, and support for those in need. As the project grew, so did Malia's reputation, not as a waitress who solved a riddle, but as a leader, a visionary who had created something that made a real difference. She knew that the journey wasn't over. There would always be more challenges to face, but for the first time in her life, she was on the path she had always dreamed of. She wasn't just a part of the story. She was writing it. EmpowerAI was growing faster than Malia had ever imagined. The platform was already making a significant impact, connecting people in underserved communities with resources they had never dreamed of accessing before. Schools in rural areas were using the educational tools to bridge gaps in learning, while clinics and healthcare professionals were utilizing the platform to provide remote consultations and vital health information to those in need. As the platform's reach expanded, Malia found herself becoming more than just the CEO of a startup. She had become a symbol of hope and change. The world had finally recognized her for who she truly was, a leader with the vision and determination to make a difference. However, with success came new challenges. Malia had to navigate the complexities of running a growing company while ensuring that the values of EmpowerAI remained intact. She was often pulled in multiple directions, attending investor meetings, managing her team, and speaking at events to promote her work. As much as she loved the work, the pressure was starting to take its toll. She hadn't expected the constant scrutiny that came with being in the spotlight. At times, it felt like the more she accomplished, the higher the expectations became. Yet, despite the stress, Malia refused to compromise on the mission of EmpowerAI. She wanted to make sure that every decision, every partnership, was rooted in the core belief that technology should be used for good. She knew that many were watching, waiting for her to slip, to make a mistake that would undo everything she had worked for. But Malia had never been afraid of challenges. She had spent her entire life fighting for recognition, and now she was fighting for something far more important: the future of EmpowerAI and the people it was helping. Meanwhile, Shoji Takahashi, who had been her mentor and partner in this journey, saw the pressure she was under. He had offered her the resources and connections to make her dream a reality, but he knew that Malia needed more than just business advice. She needed a support system, people who believed in her not just as a businesswoman, but as a person. He reached out to her one evening, asking if she would be willing to take a step back for a moment and reflect on her journey. "Malia," he said, "you've come a long way. I know how hard you've worked, but remember that it's okay to take a breath. You don't have to carry all of this alone." His words hit her harder than she expected. For so long, she had carried the weight of her dreams and her company on her own shoulders, believing that she had to do everything herself. But Shoji's words reminded her that even the strongest leaders needed support. Over the next few weeks, Malia took a step back. She delegated more tasks to her team, allowing them to take ownership of certain aspects of the company. She also sought out guidance from trusted mentors and advisors, taking the time to reconnect with her own values and the reasons she started EmpowerAI in the first place. This period of reflection allowed Malia to recalibrate and focus on what truly mattered, the impact she was having on the world. As EmpowerAI continued to grow, so did Malia's confidence in her ability to lead. She was no longer just the girl who had solved a riddle to earn $800 million. She was a visionary entrepreneur who had built something that could change the world. But with this growth came new challenges. EmpowerAI had become a beacon of hope for many, but there were also those who saw it as a threat. Competitors in the tech industry began to take notice, and with that attention came attempts to discredit her work. Some tried to undermine the company's success, questioning its viability and accusing Malia of taking shortcuts. These attacks were the same tactics she had faced throughout her life. People trying to knock her down, to remind her of her place. But this time, Malia was ready. She had fought too hard and come too far to let anyone's doubts shake her. "They can try to bring us down," she said to her team one afternoon. "But what we're doing here is bigger than any of them." It was during this time that Malia realized that her true strength wasn't just in her intellect or her ability to solve problems. It was in her resilience. She had come from nothing, and yet here she was, leading a company that was changing the world. No one could take that away from her. As EmpowerAI continued to grow, Malia knew that the journey was far from over. There would always be more challenges to face, more battles to fight. But she was no longer afraid of what the future might hold. She had proven herself, and now she was ready to lead her company into the next chapter, with the same passion and determination that had gotten her this far. The world was watching, and Malia was ready to show them what true leadership looked like. As EmpowerAI continued to grow, so did the challenges that came with it. Malia had built something incredible, but now the weight of her success was beginning to feel heavier. The more recognition her company received, the more enemies it seemed to create. Her competitors, once indifferent to her, were now actively seeking to undermine her progress. They spread rumors about the company's sustainability, questioned its business model, and tried to discredit her every chance they got. For a while, the attacks rattled her. Despite all the successes, Malia found herself questioning whether she was really cut out for this. She had been underestimated her entire life, and now, with the weight of EmpowerAI on her shoulders, she felt like she was standing at the edge of something bigger, something that could either make her or break her. The pressure was mounting, and there were days when she wondered if she could handle it all. Yet, even in the face of adversity, Malia's resolve remained unshaken. She had been through too much to give up now. She had worked too hard to let others define her future. Shoji Takahashi, her trusted partner, could see the strain in her eyes. One evening, after yet another stressful meeting with investors, he took Malia aside. "You've done something remarkable," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "But you can't fight every battle alone." Malia looked at him, her mind racing. Shoji was right. She had spent so much time trying to prove herself that she had neglected to build the support system she needed. She had surrounded herself with people who believed in her, but now, she needed to lean on them in ways she never had before. That night, Malia made a decision. She was going to trust her team more. She was going to delegate. She would no longer carry the weight of the company on her own shoulders. The next day, she called a meeting with her leadership team. As they sat around the table, Malia spoke candidly. "We've built something extraordinary here, but I can't do this alone anymore. I need all of you to step up, to take ownership of what we're building." Her words were simple but powerful. For the first time in a long while, Malia didn't feel like the only one carrying the load. She realized that EmpowerAI was not just her vision. It was the vision of the entire team. As she watched her colleagues take charge, she felt a wave of relief wash over her. The burden wasn't as heavy when shared. Over the next few months, EmpowerAI's growth accelerated. With the leadership team stepping up, Malia found herself focusing on what she did best, driving innovation, creating partnerships, and pushing the boundaries of what the company could achieve. The skepticism from her competitors remained, but Malia didn't let it faze her. She knew that their attacks were just noise. EmpowerAI was about more than just competition. It was about changing lives. As the company expanded into new markets and created more opportunities for underserved communities, Malia found herself at the forefront of a movement. She was no longer just a woman who had solved a riddle to win $800 million. She had become a symbol of what was possible when you believed in yourself, even when the world told you that you didn't belong. And as she stood on the stage at an international tech conference, accepting an award for innovation in social good, Malia looked out at the crowd. The room was filled with people who once doubted her, and now they were applauding her. But she didn't need their approval anymore. The work was speaking for itself. EmpowerAI was changing the world, one community at a time, and Malia was at the helm of it all. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. It hadn't been easy. The road had been long, and there had been moments when she thought about walking away. But those moments were behind her now. She had built something that mattered, something that was bigger than herself, and it was only just beginning. Malia had proven that no matter where you come from or what people think of you, if you have the will and the vision, you can create a legacy that changes the world. The journey wasn't over, but Malia was ready for whatever came next. As EmpowerAI continued to flourish, Malia found herself at a crossroads. The company had grown exponentially, reaching markets she once thought were out of reach, and the impact it was making on underserved communities was undeniable. Still, a nagging feeling lingered in the back of her mind, urging her to reflect on her true purpose. She had come so far, transforming from a waitress dismissed as insignificant into a powerful leader in the tech world. But now, with the success of EmpowerAI in full swing, Malia began to wonder if her journey had really just begun. While her company thrived, the pressure to keep up with the ever-expanding demands of global growth weighed heavily on her. Malia had always believed in doing things on her terms, but now she was faced with new challenges. How could she keep her company's mission intact while scaling to a global level? Could EmpowerAI maintain its core values of accessibility and equality as it became a global tech leader? Malia knew that the growth of her company meant more people, more resources, and more influence, but it also meant more scrutiny. It meant more people watching, more competitors waiting for a misstep, and more high expectations from the world. The weight of it all was enough to make her wonder if she was ready for the next phase. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day of meetings and product launches, Malia sat alone in her office. She looked out at the sprawling city below, the lights flickering like tiny beacons of possibility. In that moment, she realized something. She wasn't just a leader. She was part of a larger movement, a movement that was changing how technology was seen and used in the world. EmpowerAI wasn't just about technology. It was about empowerment. It was about giving people the tools to change their lives and communities. She had seen firsthand the difference technology could make when it was in the right hands, and she knew she couldn't stop now. With that realization, Malia felt a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just going to lead a successful company. She was going to change the world. She would focus on expanding EmpowerAI's impact, not just through its products, but through the partnerships it forged. She knew that in order to scale, she would need to bring in more people who shared her vision. As Malia looked ahead, she knew she couldn't do it alone. The challenges ahead would require a team, a network of allies who could help her take EmpowerAI to new heights while staying true to its original mission. That's when she reached out to Shoji Takahashi again. Despite their initial differences, Takahashi had proven to be an invaluable ally. He had supported her vision from the start, and now, Malia needed his expertise more than ever. She called him and asked him to meet. When they sat down together, Malia spoke with renewed clarity. "Shoji," she said, "we've built something incredible. But now, I want to build something even bigger. I need your help to take this to the next level, but I want to do it in a way that stays true to what we've always stood for." Takahashi listened intently, his gaze steady and thoughtful. He had always admired Malia's determination, but now, he saw her in a new light. She wasn't just looking for business growth. She was looking to make a lasting impact on the world. "I'm with you, Malia," he said, his voice sincere. "Let's take EmpowerAI beyond borders and make it a global force for good. But we have to remember what got us here in the first place. Our mission to empower people, not just to profit." With Takahashi's support, Malia began to put her plan into action. She started focusing on global partnerships with nonprofit organizations, government agencies, and educational institutions that shared her goal of creating equal access to resources. Together, they would build a network of support for people all over the world who had been overlooked by traditional tech companies. Malia's vision had always been clear: to create a future where technology wasn't a luxury, but a necessity. And now, she was taking the steps to make that future a reality. EmpowerAI was no longer just a company. It was a movement that was about more than just providing services. It was about changing the way the world viewed technology and its potential to solve real-world problems. Malia's journey had been long, and there were still many obstacles ahead. But for the first time, she felt confident that she was on the right path. The challenges of scaling a global company were daunting, but with Shoji by her side and a team that believed in her mission, Malia was ready to take on whatever came next. As she stood in front of a room full of investors, government leaders, and tech innovators at a global summit, Malia felt the weight of her journey. But she also felt something else: pride. She had come a long way from the girl who had been underestimated, the waitress who had solved a riddle for $800 million. Now, she was leading a global movement to make the world a better place. She had earned her place at the table, and she was ready to show the world what EmpowerAI could do. Months passed, and Malia's vision for EmpowerAI continued to unfold. The company expanded into new countries, creating partnerships with governments, nonprofits, and corporations that shared her belief in the power of technology to transform lives. Malia was no longer just leading a company. She had become a global force. For good. EmpowerAI was more than just a tech startup now. It was a movement. The mission to bridge the digital divide, to empower the underserved, was resonating on a level Malia had never imagined. Yet, even with all this success, she remained grounded. She hadn't forgotten where she came from. She hadn't forgotten the long hours she had spent working in the restaurant, the constant battles against prejudice, and the feeling of being invisible in a room full of people. That had been her driving force, to ensure that no one else had to feel overlooked. As the company grew, so did the team that helped her realize this dream. Her leadership style had evolved. No longer was she the solitary force at the top, carrying the weight of EmpowerAI on her own shoulders. She had learned the value of delegation, of trusting her team, and of allowing others to shine alongside her. Shoji Takahashi, ever the mentor, had remained by her side through the entire journey. His guidance had been invaluable, but he knew this was Malia's time now. He had stepped back, allowing her to take the reins, while still offering support whenever needed. Together, they had built something that not only changed the tech industry, but also touched lives in ways they hadn't even dreamed of. The night that EmpowerAI was recognized at the Global Tech Awards was one of the most defining moments of Malia's life. She stood on stage, accepting the award for Most Impactful Technology Company of the Year, surrounded by people who had once doubted her. The applause was deafening, but it wasn't the applause that mattered to her. What mattered was the recognition of the people whose lives EmpowerAI had changed. The schools in rural Africa that now had access to the best online learning platforms. The hospitals in South America that could offer telemedicine to remote villages. The families in underserved neighborhoods who were able to access healthcare resources, career training, and financial literacy programs. All thanks to EmpowerAI. As Malia accepted the award, she couldn't help but think of the journey it had taken to get here. The countless sacrifices, the moments of doubt, and the unwavering belief in the power of technology to create change. But the journey wasn't just hers. It had been the collective effort of the EmpowerAI team, the mentors, the partners, and the communities who believed in what they were building. Standing there on stage, Malia realized that this wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning. The world was watching, but now, more than ever, Malia was ready to lead it forward. She had faced the impossible, overcome the odds, and built a company that had redefined what success meant. But the work was far from over. She wasn't done. She couldn't afford to be done. There were still millions of people around the world who needed the kind of change EmpowerAI could bring. And so, Malia's journey continued. She returned to her office, where she sat quietly for a moment, reflecting on all that had been accomplished. But it wasn't time for rest. The world was evolving, and so would EmpowerAI. The technology, the mission, the impact, it would continue to grow. Malia wasn't just leading a company. She was leading a revolution in how technology could shape the future. She wasn't just the girl who solved a riddle for $800 million. She was the woman who had changed the world, one breakthrough at a time. And as she looked out of her office window, Malia knew that the best was yet to come. EmpowerAI was her legacy. It was a testament to everything she had fought for, and it was proof that anyone, no matter where they came from, could make a lasting impact on the world.